Ready?
Action.
Paper matches, book matches. Folks, don't waste your time. They're far too susceptible to moisture. They don't travel well. You know, do this a couple of times in your pack, forget it. I hope to God you don't rely on them for your flame. The minimum match you should ever carry into the bush is something like this. This is a camp match, wooden camp match. Sometimes these are advertised as waterproof or windproof. Don't believe that. They're water resistant or wind resistant, but they are not waterproof. These are waterproof. They're match containers. If you're going to carry matches, and I suggest strongly that you do, you need to carry a waterproof match box or match case. These are inexpensive. You can step on these, drop them in the water. What you need to bring. Now, the strike anywhere catching match. You know, it's an improvement over these little guys. It's not as convenient to carry that as it is that, but that's a maybe 4-second match, and that's a 6-second match, and it makes all the difference in the world. You need to get that flame under your tinder and keep it there long enough for that to be guaranteed that that it definitely is lit. If you're going to carry a wooden match, and as I said, I strongly suggest you do, you should waterproof them, even if you're going to carry them in a waterproof match case. A lot of people will use paraffin and dip the matches. I don't like it. It takes up too much space in the match case. It makes a very, very thick layer. It also could be chipped and broken off. I like to spray them with like a spray lacquer. It's thinner, it's just as waterproof, and actually accelerates the burn, just like paraffin does. Just a real quick demonstration. Here's an untreated camp match. See, the flame is not, it's not spectacular. You imagine a paper match would have been even less so. Here's a strike anywhere kitchen match. It's also untreated. Give you a few more seconds of burn time. That's all important. This is a fireplace match, sometimes used to start campfires or barbecues. What I've done is I've cut it to make it a little more convenient to carry. I sprayed lacquered it, and I painted the tips here with a bright colored nail polish, so that not only can I find it if I drop it, but that acts as an accelerant. I've chipped the match, flared it, what the Boy Scouts call a fur stick, or a fuzz stick, and you know, that really gives you a few minutes, a few seconds I should say, of reliable flame. Now the pièce de résistance. That's a lifeboat match, and although it's not much bigger than these, it can do what they can't. You see, right behind the ignition head is a material that's very similar to a road flare, and it's practically hurricane proof. I'm going to blow on this thing as hard as I can to show you how that burns. Boy, that's a stinky old match, but you know, it'll definitely get that fire going when you need to have it made in one. Remember this? This is Grandpa's lighter. My dad had one of these. I think John Wayne had one of these. They're tougher than a brick. You can drive over this thing, you're not going to hurt it. The bad part about this kind of lighter is its fuel. It evaporates. It dries up whether you use it or not. This has been in my pack maybe 4 days. I filled it then, and you can see The heat, the summertime heat has driven the fuel from it. It's useless to me. The flint inside it is of more value to me than the lighter is itself. Better than that, I strongly suggest you carry that. They're inexpensive, they're small, and they're reliable. I can only make 3 suggestions when it comes to disposable lighters. The first is, get a bright color. If you drop it, you'll want to find it. Secondly, when at all possible, get one with a transparent fuel capsule so you can monitor how much fuel you've got left in the lighter. It's pretty important. Thirdly, whenever possible, get one that's child resistant. Not that you worry about the kids playing with it, although of course that is a concern, but more because you're less likely to have this thing bump up against your binoculars or your camera in your pack and get accidentally emptied. And when you need it, you're out of luck. Let me show you some of these spark-based systems, these man-made spark-based systems, mass-produced. This is a quality tool, and with the right type of tinder such as this, let me show you how quickly that could be made to burn. Not even using magnesium, just the flash of this flint onto the right tinder. It's fire. Quick, simple, easy, totally impervious to weather. You can drop this in the stream, pick it up, wipe it off on your t-shirt. That's something your disposable lighter will not do. Now these type of fire tools, the two-handed versions, are easy, inexpensive, and convenient. And not half as convenient as plunge match. Flame in one. Flame in one. If you gotta have one tool, I just don't know which one I prefer more. They're both fantastic. I'd rather have this than a box load of disposable lighters. Alright, here's some gauze from your first aid kit. And you need flame. Get that magnesium-based starter. It's hard to see, it's burning, I'll show you. That is definitely burning. It's cotton fiber. May have a few other things in it, but who cares? It's flammable. Alright, cotton balls, again from the first aid kit. Or maybe you have some a woman's sanitary napkin that can be pulled apart. As long as it's really cotton and not synthetic. There's a couple of different ways of using the flint and steel to capture a spark in your char cloth. There's a couple of different techniques, but I prefer this one. I'll show you the one I don't prefer, and then I'll demonstrate the one I do. The char cloth, which is a 100% cotton cloth that you've charred in a cooker to remove everything but the carbonized cotton. Sometimes what I've seen done is they'll take this char cloth, place the flint, or the steel rather, above it, and they'll strike the flint down its length. The sparks that come off are subsequently captured in the char cloth. I don't like that because you're really not holding all 3 components, and you're not controlling it. What I prefer to do is take the char cloth, hold it right at the very edge of the flint, so it's just perfectly in line. Now, you want to be careful when you use a flint and steel because that flint will chip. They're razor sharp, and they could go anywhere. You're usually pretty safe above it. You're striking everything below it. But if there are other people standing around you, watching your demonstration or watching you produce fire, they could be at risk. Anyway, what I do is hold it along the edge of the flint and strike it. Okay, I got a couple of nice ones burning. Catch your tinder. Flame. Just about as fast as you would have done it if you did it with a match. Here's something some of you might not know. This is steel wool. And steel wool, in and of itself, catches sparks and becomes a living spark. if you had something like that in your mess equipment and you needed to make a fire and that's all you had, you could pull it apart and produce flame.
Excellent.
Hey, you don't have any of those fancy gizmos, but you do have a 9-volt battery from your radio, and you've got some steel wool. Handy to have along. Here we have a selection of some of my steels. Some of these were purchased and others were made. This is handmade. I purchased it, but I didn't make it myself. It's handmade someplace in Pennsylvania. Tiny little 2-finger steel. Steels are basically high carbon steel that when hit against a very hard rock such as flint or chert, they produce a spark. These are nothing more than rat-tail files that have been bent and retempered to be of a certain hardness, whereby when I hit them against a sharpened piece of flint, they'll shear off a tiny slice of metal, just like the metal in a nichrome wire of a flash bulb. When that heat goes to it, it glows, or just like the steel wool. When the steel wool catches that spark, it glows. What you're doing by hitting it against this flint is, the flint being so hard, actually shaves a tiny piece of metal off of this carbon steel, and it does it so quickly that it's hot, and that bursts to flame. Not flame, but a spark. If we can capture that spark, we can convert it from a spark to a flame. Now, this was my father's file 20 years ago. God rest his soul. If he ever knew I stole this from his toolbox as a child and was using it now to make fire, he'd laugh. First, he'd punish me, then he'd laugh. But this is by far my favorite striking steel. I've had this for many years, and I don't know how many fires it started for me, quite a few. And you can get a file in any store with little modification. You can convert it to a really good striking steel. It should be high carbon steel, and it should not have teeth. The teeth of the file need to be ground away on like a wheel or possibly against another stone so that it's smooth. If you use the tooth side of the steel, all you'll do is destroy the stone. You don't want to do that. You want the stone to affect the steel, not the other way around. Now, the secret to capturing a spark produced from the steel and flint is char cloth. A lot of people say, well, you got to have the right type of flint. You have to have the right type of metals to do. Yeah, you need all that, but by far, much more important is the cloth we capture the spark in. We call that char cloth, and I'll show you how it's made. Cooker. As a matter of fact, it's my favorite. This one's a fairly heavy gauged metal can. Inside, you see it's full of nasty carbon, and this is char cloth. What it is a 100% cotton cloth that we've cooked over an open flame in this can until it was converted to char. The way we do that, modify this can so that it's got a hole here. Let's see if you can see that. I'll put this nail in it. It's got this hole here, and there's a corresponding hole in the lid. So what we do is we line those up so that the gases can escape. We put this on a fire and ignore it. And copious amounts of smoke will bellow out of that hole while anything that's inside that's flammable is released. When the smoke stops coming from that hole, that means there's nothing inside that remains except from the char cloth. What you do is, with well-protected hands, I like to use some old pot holders that the wife doesn't use anymore, and on top of that I even wear a heavy leather glove. I'll remove this from the fire, I'll twist it, locking off the air. You can't let air get in there. If air gets in, it'll ignite the cloth. Remember, one of the key ingredients to producing flame is oxygen. There's fuel and heat in this can, it only needs the oxygen. So what we're doing is we deny it the oxygen, we take it off and we let it cool. Once it's done that, you get this. Char cloth should be just enough that you could pull it apart. I mean, this still looks a lot like cloth. It's just black. There's nothing left but flammable material. This is an industrial size. You can make quite a lot of char cloth in this can. But if need be, you can use something quite small. This was shoe polish. And I'll take a small nail and a hole. I'll stick it in there and deprive it of oxygen once I've removed it from the fire. And when it's cooled, I have a few sheets in there. This was a lozenge box, or possibly a candy box of some kind. I've done the same thing. You would think that the seal here is loose enough where air would get in, but for some reason it really doesn't. So you put this hole in the top, and with a nail, you just plug it up, take it off the heat, and it's good to go. Let's go on and show you some cotton char cloth. We'll even catch a spark and blow it to flame.
Excellent.
There's a couple of different ways of using the flint and steel to capture a spark in your char cloth. There's a couple of different techniques, but I prefer this one. I'll show you the one I don't prefer, and then I'll demonstrate the one I do. Your char cloth, which is a 100% cotton cloth that you've charred in a cooker to remove everything but the carbonized cotton. Sometimes what I've seen done is they'll take this char cloth, place the flint, or the steel rather, above it, and they'll strike the flint down its length. The sparks that come off are subsequently captured in the char cloth. I don't like that because you're really not holding all three components, and you're not controlling it. What I prefer to do is take the char cloth, hold it right at the very edge of the flint, so it's just perfectly in line. Now, you want to be careful when you use a flint and steel because that flint will chip. They're razor sharp, and they could go anywhere. You're usually pretty safe above it. You're striking everything below it. But if there are other people standing around you, watching your demonstration or watching you produce fire, they could be at risk. Anyway, what I do is hold it along the edge of the flint and strike it. Okay, I got a couple of nice ones burned. Catch your tinder. Flame. Just about as fast as you would have done it if you did it with a match.